Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro in the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's January 15th, 2024. It is everything today. It's freezing cold out in much of the country, though a relatively tropical 30-something here, though it is snowing lightly, so we are not without winter weather entirely, but it is negative 40 billion degrees in Iowa today, where they're holding the Iowa caucuses, all on Martin Luther King Day, which we can only tell our Florida listeners is being celebrated because reasons, and that's all you're allowed to tell anybody. And I guess we have to make sure that our broadcast doesn't cross the borders of states that now forbid telling anybody why. But remember the lesson of the decades since his death. I don't know what. Nothing. I guess you're not allowed to. You're just supposed to have that one quote, and there are no other Martin Luther King quotes, because, as we all know, sharing is not caring so much as it is CRT or possibly DEI, and so there you go. You're not allowed to learn why we would celebrate this person's birthday, just that they were interested in very interesting American things, and that's all you need to know. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, let's see. We got to round up a bunch of stories. There are lots happening. Of course, it is a federal holiday, and I don't know whether it's a day that everybody is home or not, but we thought we would keep you company. I suppose we could take the day off in honor of the day, but in honor of the man, but I don't know. Somehow it seems more like, I don't know if, I certainly can't speak for Dr. King, though Republicans can, and I could ask them what they think. But you might think he would want you to keep working for justice even on his birthday, so maybe this is a better celebration. I don't know. It certainly glorifies what we're doing to say we're working for justice. But hey, seems important, and thought we might keep you company. And otherwise, you have to just go out there and listen to Republicans saying that, that one quote that they once heard really means that he would have been a Republican if he were alive today. And, that seems unlikely. It also seems unlikely that they're ever going to change their minds about it, unless, of course, they follow Charlie Kirk down the path that he apparently is taking. And a big story over the weekend was that he was ready to use his Turning Point USA organization to throw MLK over and finally say, yeah, actually he was bad. And we now admit that we're just racists, I guess. And after all, the things that he was interested in working towards are bad words now, like diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've just taught everybody how horrible they are. And so maybe it would be easier if we just stopped trying to hammer him into an imaginary Republican and just declare him an enemy like we did the first time around. Okay. Well, they're welcome to do that, I suppose, in the sense that we really hope they fall off a cliff. I mean, you're welcome to do that too. But, yeah, all right. Well, at any rate, lots of other things to catch up on today. I get a hint from Justice about what's on his mind from his comments in the morning. Let's see. Ted Cruz and the Cowboys are on a flight to Cancun after being frozen out again. Texas once again having its energy grid collapse. I thought they fixed that thing, but apparently not. It got cold again. I guess they're going to walk away from this saying, bah humbug, no such thing as global warming again, but not stopping to think in like 2 of the last 3 years we've frozen to the point where we had no electricity for several days at a time, and I don't know. I guess that's just not going to register with them. I'm not really sure why that is, but the rest of the country, I guess, will point and laugh. But lots of other things going on in Texas, not so funny as well. We'll see if we get to those in the roundup. Greg Dworkin is here. Let's usher him in. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. So did you say it was Justice's birthday? Happy birthday, Justice.
No, I didn't, but we could
Did
say
you
that.
say it was Greek Orthodox Martin Luther King Day in Arizona?
Yes, I didn't say that either also. But both of those
Is it a
things.
state holiday or a federal holiday? If it's a federal holiday,
it's a
how come
breakaway
Arizona
republic
was the last
holiday.
one to acknowledge it?
I don't know. Arizona, something about probably, I don't know, global warming. Not really sure whatever drove them about their weirdness about Martin Luther King, but I guess it's all resolving itself now if they follow this kook Charlie Kirk into let's just go back to when he was an enemy.
Well, we jape, but I think it has some profound implications in regard to who the Republican electorate is, and we'll talk about that because today's the Iowa caucus. And it's effing cold in Des Moines. It was -10 when I woke up.
Oh,
I didn't wake up in Des Moines, but I looked on the computer.
But they're behind us anyway. They get a couple extra hours.
It was only 23 here.
Okay. Yeah, balmy Connecticut.
Oh, by the way, speaking of Connecticut, did you know? I only knew this because our governor, Ned Lamont, tweeted this out this morning. Did you know that when Martin Luther King was a teenager, he took his first trip out of the segregated South to work on a farm in Connecticut over the summer.
Oh, how nice. No, I did not.
Learned
Martin
some
Luther
interesting
King
things. He wrote some letters to his mom about it. And as it turns out,
he's a letter
one
writer.
of the things, for example, just to give you an idea of where we're going and where we came from, and you can't know where you're going until you know where you came from, and where you are.
Oh, wow.
When he took the train to get to Connecticut, he got to sit with like everybody, and then he went out to restaurants with like everybody, and it was like really weird.
That must have been exciting.
And then when he went back,
revealing,
he got on the train with everybody until he hit Washington, D.C., at which point he had to move to the Jim Crow car.
Yeah.
To get to Atlanta, because that's the way things were in those days.
Yeah. Not great that Washington, D.C. was the jumping off point either, but that's some story. And working on a farm in Connecticut must have been some kind of experience, a long way from home. And, well, he probably learned a lot about there are some good people and some bad people out there.
But also how things could be compared to how they are.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, a very important lesson for him.
Mm-hmm. I guess so. I mean, appears to have, shaped the rest of his life and the rest of ours as well.
So there you have it. Everything has a local angle,
Yeah, the Connecticut angle.
The Queen's Eagle, right? Queen's man gets impeached. It's
okay.
you got to look at everything from a local angle. So speaking of local angles,
right?
Today's pundit roundup was entitled "Polls, Voters, and a Polar Vortex Threaten to Freeze Haley and DeSantis," and there's a couple of important things to talk about there.
All right, I like the title.
I want to start by talking about sort of a semi-related subject.
Oh, everything is at this point.
This is from the blog, Stephen Beschloss's blog, America, America, he calls it. And he says, what we're doing here is entering the bitter season. He shows a picture of snow at a Trump billboard in Urbandale, Iowa.
Okay.
And the billboard says Trump Make America Great Again, but all you can see is Trump because the Make America Great Again is semi-obscured by snow because it's freaking cold out there. I get that Midwesterners pride themselves on their hardiness just like we New Englanders do.
Sure.
But -10 is freaking cold.
Yeah. Well, right. It's not
so
my
he
fault.
writes, amid sub-zero weather, tonight's Iowa caucus ushers in a new phase in Donald Trump's campaign of crime and punishment.
Oh, there's punishment.
What he talks about is, look, Trump is both a criminal defendant and a candidate for the nation's highest office and requires us to pay attention to the results in Iowa to remain informed. But let's not get pulled into the horse race mentality that typically defines the presidential election season, while far too many of our fellow citizens refuse to accept the gravity of Trump's legal and moral violations. And that's where we get to talk about Iowa voters. I still believe we can make increasingly clear in the coming months how grim America's future will be if Trump retakes levers of power. The bitter sub-zero cold of Iowa is a useful reminder of the cruel conditions that 4 more years of Donald Trump and beyond, as the ominously told an Iowa audience, portends. Little foreshadowing there.
Yes.
In style.
I'm brought to mind of the best take of the weather report from Groundhog Day, when Chekhov describes winter, right? Okay. Well, a poetic way of pointing out, how bleak it is. If you think negative 15 is bad, wait till you have a second Donald Trump administration.
We have to pay attention to the horse race, but let's not get sucked into and blinded by the horse race.
Right.
There's an Iowa caucus here. I think the New York Times is bringing back. Do you have that dramatic squirrel music?
Dramatic. Oh, yes, absolutely. The New York Times are we there yet?
Is bringing back.
Yes.
The needle.
No. Well, I don't have anything for that.
You moron.
Yeah, right. There we go. I need that out of the way. Where is that one? Oh,
what the hell is supposed to do, you moron?
Exactly.
I know that's your favorite. Okay. Well, okay. The needle is back. Don't get sucked into the horse race. The needle's back.
In fact, they may even have a secondary needle for second place. So, look,
come on.
Donald Trump is going to be the nominee for the Republican Party. Donald Trump's going to win the Iowa caucus.
Right.
And I was listening to some absolutely fascinating, I didn't send it to you, but I certainly will by the end of my segment, an absolutely fascinating segment where Sarah Longwell, herself a pollster who does focus groups, was chatting with the dean of excellent pollsters, J.N. Selzer, about what she does in Iowa, how she does things in Iowa, why the Republican voting group is the way it is in regard to Trump. And one of the things that Seltzer says is one of the reasons she gets it right and other people get it wrong is she doesn't model who the likely electorate is going to be. She calls everyone. Iowa's small enough so you could do that.
Is it?
And that's one of the reasons why she doesn't go national.
Huh. Well, you can't do that nationally.
Yeah, you can't do that in California, but you can do it in Iowa.
Okay.
And Sarah Longwell and Ann Seltzer were making some observations about the Iowa electorate. For example, the total number of people who are going to caucus is unknown. There may be some depressed turnout because of the weather.
Right.
But it's going to be between like 120 and 180,000 people.
Okay. Can you call them all?
That's a lot if you're trying to feed them in your living room, but not a lot when you're looking at, say, the electorate in California.
Definitely not.
Right? So, Ann Seltzer made a couple of points here. Everybody talks about the fact that Iowa has a standard model for how things go. You have to go to these, Pizza Ranch places, and you have to have living room conversations with people. And as the old Saturday Night Live joke, I think it was about Carter, and I think it was about Iowa, could have been New Hampshire. It's like you have to go to their house and do their laundry,
right, okay.
But you don't. What you have to do is you have to reach the number of people who are going to caucus for you and convince them to go caucus for you.
Yes. Okay.
And Donald Trump doesn't do the standard Iowa things. He has rallies of 7,000 or 8,000 people. He gets them for various and sundry reasons we'll talk about. Mm-hmm. And that's how he gets his caucus folks. And with Trump, because he's essentially an incumbent, they know him. You don't have to convince people who already support him to support him. They do.
Right. Okay.
All right. The others have to, are going about Iowa the wrong way. DeSantis is a perfect example. Haley, too.
Oh.
You don't go and try to convince Trump voters to vote for you instead. That's a fail. Because the Iowa caucuses are so small, what you have to do is figure that in every given caucus year, it's like going to Times Square for New Year's. I don't know if you ever have.
No.
But you only go once.
Yeah, for the experience.
This is it? I'm not doing this again.
That's going to a Grateful Dead show for me.
Right? So the point is...
I did do too, but I mean, okay.
That a lot of people, maybe even the majority from year to year, are new caucus goers. So your job as Haley or as DeSantis isn't to convince Trump voters to vote for you. It's to convince people who weren't Trump voters to vote for you.
Okay.
That's how Nikkki Haley winds up getting to be in second place.
She learned that sooner than DeSantis?
DeSantis has never learned it.
Okay, well then it's if she's learned it, then I guess the answer is yes.
So people like DeSantis. They don't not like him, as one of the focus group people said.
These are humans?
Yeah.
Say this?
They don't not like him.
Really?
But,
okay.
They like Trump better. So they're going to vote for Trump end of DeSantis' campaign. He banked everything on Iowa. He's going to lose.
Okay.
Nikkki Haley, here's the report from the Des Moines Register from the poll. 23% of Nikkki Haley supporters say they would vote for Donald Trump in a rematch with Joe Biden. The majority of them would vote for Biden.
Wow. Well, good.
Okay. So what does that mean, and what's that all about? Nikkki Haley has, in fact, gotten people who otherwise don't like Trump to consider voting for her.
Yes.
They're independents, Democrats, soft Republicans, and they're not especially committed to her. Like, they're not enthusiastic for her, but they'll vote for her to stop Trump. Okay. And that's where the weather may come in. Her people that she's identified and gotten was the smart thing to do, because that's how you can possibly do okay. You can't get Trump's people, but maybe you can get everybody else and try to consolidate them.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, because they're loosely committed to you, they may not show up in 10 to 15 degree below zero weather with wind chills worse.
I guess.
So that's why the poll says that Haley's in second place, but we're not really sure. And most people on the ground expect DeSantis to actually come in second.
Oh, really?
And if he doesn't, he's doomed. But that's what they think. They think that Haley has better numbers, but we're not so sure about her voters. DeSantis has slightly worse numbers, but we think his voters will show up, and we're not sure Haley's will. That's the word on the ground.
That is, yeah, hey, that's interesting. I don't know, and it may or may not all be weather related. There's also the boredom factor that I hear a lot. Even if it's good weather, people say this just takes forever. We're going to be out of the house all night.
Right. And then, so you don't do it again, and that's why you have to recruit new ones. So the poll says respondents who plan to caucus for Haley stand out as significantly less optimistic about Trump's chances. A majority of Haley supporters say it would be nearly impossible for Trump to win against Biden given his legal challenges. That's 54%. But that's down from the last poll. 23% of Haley supporters said they'd vote for Trump in a matchup with Biden. The plurality of Haley supporters, 43%, would vote for Biden instead. Well, that's great. And it does suggest, the poll otherwise suggests that maybe a quarter of the caucus voters aren't going to vote for Trump.
Okay.
Now, whether that's true or not, we'll see. He still wins Iowa.
Yeah, and there's also the weird dynamic.
And he's still going to be the nominee. That's not a question. But there may be some softness in the overall general electorate there. I was arguing with Liam Donovan about that online. And he said, yeah, I see the numbers. I get what you're saying. But you have to understand that the Republican primary voters are different than everybody else in the world. And, of course, that's true. You could see that in the focus groups. So one of the things that the focus groups identified, and Sarah Longwell kept saying to Ann Seltzer, you've been doing this a whole lot longer than I have, and you've done a lot of these focus groups over the years. Is this different than 10 years ago? In other words, you have focus groups where you get Trump voters together, and when they're together, they say all the quiet parts out loud. They say all the things that you would think in polite company they would never say. I'm not voting for Ramaswamy. I don't know where he's from. I can't pronounce his name. That kind of stuff.
Hey.
They agree. Ann Seltzer and the poll asked him specific questions about things Trump had said, like vermin and poisoning the blood. And you may recall there was a story that said Iowa voters like that stuff and only like Trump more when he says it because he's one of us.
Oh, awesome.
So, you have Iowa voters. Remember, Iowa voters elected Steve King to Congress.
True.
The guy who said that the immigrants are walking across the border with calves the size of cantaloupes because they're hauling drugs.
Okay. Yeah.
Remember?
Heavy drugs.
They loved it.
Yeah. Yep. I do. I remember that. I'm always struck by that. Like cantaloupes. What a pull.
The point there is The reason Trump is doing so well is he is one of them.
Yes.
Yeah, he's a billionaire, he's a crook, and all that sort of stuff.
Apparently
but he
smells
speaks
bad.
their language. He thinks the way they think. He believes the things they believe. That's scary. That's bad. It used to be that in polite company you didn't say that stuff, and Trump essentially is given a permission structure to say those things.
Yes.
And you're seeing it play out in Iowa, and that's why he's going to wind up winning the caucus, and that's why Haley and DeSantis are wasting their time trying to convince Trump voters not to vote for Trump. That's never going to happen. Everything about persuasion is what Haley is trying to do. If only her voters would show up, she's trying to get the people who don't like Trump, who want to vote for somebody else. That's ripe territory. And enough so that she can get, 20% to Trump's 48% in the poll, whereas DeSantis got 16, and those positions are flipped from the last one. So you're talking about a fifth of the Republican electorate who don't want to vote for him. And that could have significance in a general election if you look at the closest swing states in Iowa.
Yeah.
But you're not going to convince the people who are already Trump voters to vote for Trump. All persuasion is aimed at everybody else, just as discussions about whether or not Trump is a good or a bad candidate is not aimed at the Republican primary where Trump is going to win. It's at the general where you're talking about everybody else. Now, Ann Seltzer made another comment, which I thought was interesting to Sarah Longwell.
She won't stop.
And, she was saying a lot of interesting things. It was an hour-long conversation.
Oh, wow.
And she said the thing that Democrats haven't wrapped their head around, and I disagree with her about this because I think it's the press and not Democrats, but she said the thing that the Democrats haven't wrapped their head around is that Trump voters agree with him on these things. Every single time we bring up something that you would think is slightly rude or off color or something that you would never, they say, yeah, we love it.
Yeah.
This is who they are.
Yeah.
This is what they want.
Okay. I think you're right. I mean, I think my head's around that.
Sure. Been around that for a long time.
Yeah. Like 2016.
And if you want to get academic
clearly
about it, there's a new book out, sort of talking about a tangential part about this, how Trump went from disgraced insurrectionist to GOP frontrunner and the deep roots of Trump's staying power. And there's a lot to do with the fact that the parties themselves don't have any power to change things. But it also has to do, in this write-up by Eric Levitz, with the multi-generation, multi-decade conservative, it's okay to say these things stuff, going back to William Buckley, through Fox News. And that's how we get to where we are now. And that's how come Trump is the GOP nominee. So the press keeps doing both sides stuff. But the fact of the matter is, it's the Republican electorate that's the problem.
Yeah.
Trump is merely the symptom. We've said that, but this is like stark relief.
Yes.
This really outlines in Iowa exactly what they're talking about here. It's not just like a random thought. It's not abstract. It's absolutely real, and you can give quotes to the comments to show exactly what we're talking about here.
We can. But yeah, you did mention somewhere in there about the still both sides, and of course who's wrapping their heads around it and who isn't. But it wasn't this good part of this weekend
that has the problem with it, not us.
Yeah. Good part of this weekend spent circulating the screenshot of a Wall Street Journal, I think, opinion article, right? But and it may even have been from a Republican member of Congress, but a lot of commentary on the headline. I didn't put it away because, well, one, I don't subscribe to the Journal, but two, okay. But nonsense. But the idea of both sides are attacking democracy. Somewhere was what was the headline? Did you see this one?
No.
It was, I paid no attention to it, but yeah, I mean, it was just illustrative
whether it's downplaying what Trump is doing or saying, there's a democracy crisis in this election, as if it's like both sides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
that's
this one,
the concept.
The headline here just screamed it straight out. But it was an opinion piece, to be sure, but don't print that opinion. It's dumb. But, Wall Street Journal.
Right. Oh, Dave Weigel points out another fun thing about both Iowa and New Hampshire.
Yes.
Right. Cold. One of the first things a reporter learns covering these primaries is if you go and you see a voter at one of these events, maybe a Haley event will have 40, so you get to interview people. you have to ask them where they're from. For example, in New Hampshire, if you're not careful at some Nashua town hall, you'll get a notebook full of Massachusetts people.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I can
Right?
see that.
The Iowa and New Hampshire caucuses, he writes, are big media events. So you get a lot of visitors from other states. You know,
Even in the cold?
Political tourists, they call them. Some for fun, some to protest the candidate.
Huh.
They can't vote for the candidate, but they want to
Yeah.
make a presence known or something. Political tourists.
I could see that, you know. Right, yeah, you want to get yourself on TV. There's a camera every 5 feet in these two states. So you
And then,
okay.
you know, as somebody on Twitter pointed out, so don't give political tourists who go to Nashua to see the candidate and they happen to be from Rhode Island, you know, don't give them a hard time. Right now you have Ron DeSantis from Florida talking to people in Iowa about America.
Yes.
Well, how representative is that? Come on. They're political tourists.
Yeah, that's true. I always
Anyway,
I get a kick
Michael
out of that.
says,
And
I have this memory of a case at town hall in New Hampshire. Everybody he called on was from Maryland.
Maryland, that's really interesting.
got
That's
really
a long
irritated.
way to go. I can believe that. Yeah, I just I'm also reminded of the stories that reporters file where they point out that there are more reporters than voters at this event. You know, that's a fairly
Dean
common
Phillips
thing,
doesn't
too.
have this problem because when he goes to a rally, there's nobody there, so you don't have to worry about where they're from. He's like there by himself.
Well, you can get away with just buying 1 dozen donuts for your giveaways.
Right.
Okay.
Anyway, so
Keeps costs
the
down.
basic structure here is that there's an Iowa caucus today. It matters because you have to follow what Trump's going on. Don't get sucked into the horse race. There isn't a horse race. Trump is the nominee.
He smells like a horse, I'm told.
After the break, I'm going to argue that Haley and DeSantis are struggling to finish third, which is to say each wants to and wants the other to be second. And I'll tell you why after the break.
Okay, I see. Interesting. So set up for the takedown, I suppose. All right, that's next.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. It's cold out there. It's cold out there
even
every
colder
day.
in the morning.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. What do you think this is? Miami Beach? No. Okay, not hardly. Anyway, it's Des Moines, Iowa. It's freezing cold. What time zone are they in?
Central.
Yeah. Okay. So it's 8:30 in the cold morning in Iowa, and they don't caucus until the evening anyway. Warm up by 1 degree
It's
when the
as
sun
cold
comes
as the
up.
Kansas City
and then go
playoff
back
game.
down.
Take that, Miami.
Whoa. All right. Yeah. A bunch of weather-related incidents at football stadiums around the country, I guess.
Yeah.
I did see.
There was a weather-related incident, apparently, with the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were wrecked by a tornado.
Oh. Well, there were all sorts of things going on. Was one of the games, I paid no attention to the football over the weekend because there's a number of other things going on, but was one of the games delayed, actually, in the start by weather?
Well, Buffalo canceled and delayed it a
that's
couple of
the one.
days because
That
you
must be
couldn't
it.
see.
Well, you do
Even
need to be able
hiring
to see.
people to shovel the field wasn't enough. It was blizzard conditions, and you couldn't see down the field to throw the ball.
Well, right. You need to be able to see what's going on. I'll agree with them there.
You need to see the ball before it hits you in the
I just
face.
saw that could get stuck right in that gap in in the face mask. Well, very few people actually
Speaking
have
of
that
stuff,
gap
can you imagine
anymore.
you throw the ball and it just freezes there in the air?
Right. It
You have to
shatters
wait a
when you
week and a
catch
half
it.
for it to melt so that you can see who caught it.
I saw on Twitter much discussion. It was brought over to the other social media from Twitter that I guess some checkmark weirdo was out there griping about a game that had been delayed. They didn't mention which game it was. That's how I didn't know. But saying in particular that what is this? America's getting weak kind of thing. Like, did we delay D-Day because of the weather? No, we soldiered on. Well,
No, we did actually delay it. You did.
Famously was in fact delayed by weather. But I don't know. Maybe it was a joke. Who knows? If it's a conservative person, they'll say it was a joke afterwards. So
Yeah.
anyway, that was out there. Football happened. Caucuses will happen despite the cold. And what else were we talking about? What were we going to do next?
Well, I wanted to mention that one can argue that there's a strategy that
yes.
Haley and DeSantis have known for a while and certainly know now and will know even better after the needle
Right.
that
four-way
they've
needle or
lost.
something.
So how do you get out of the race? What's the exit strategy for Haley and for DeSantis? DeSantis is easy.
Quit, right?
Well, but if he's third, he quits and nobody would question it.
Right.
He's announced he's not even going to New Hampshire. He's going to go right
I
to
see.
South Carolina, bypassing Nevada.
Now I got you. Oh, okay.
But if he finishes third, he's done. He put all his eggs in the basket of Iowa.
Well,
he went to
whiz,
all
everybody.
99,
Counties in
villages,
Iowa.
shtetls. I don't know, whatever. And
99 counties, right?
He lost.
They do it.
Right?
If
he's second, there may be pressure on him to stay in the race. But if he's third, he can leave.
That is interesting. Okay, I get
What
you
about
now.
Nikkki Haley? If she's
guess same thing.
second, she's stuck. She has to go to New Hampshire. She may even do that if she's third, but if she's second, she has to. Right?
Yeah.
If she finishes a weak third because her people don't show up, she gets to leave whenever she wants.
I guess so.
So it's better for them since they're going to lose.
Lose big.
It's better for them to get out. And they just have to figure out how. They have to manage their exit strategy, both of them. And that's why they may be arguing about who should finish third. That's why they keep attacking each other, and they don't attack Donald Trump at all.
Why don't they just say, why don't they build up the other one? You know what? That other guy is
which
better
for
than me.
DeSantis was a completely failed strategy from the beginning. And I've seen this argument, and I think of Scott Walker, and I think of Jeb Bush, but one could argue that Ron DeSantis possibly in our lifetime has run the worst possible Democratic, Republican, anybody, party presidential campaign.
Yes,
Fred
the worst,
Thompson.
major party campaign, I guess we would say.
Bill
yeah,
Graham.
Thompson.
I mean, there's a list,
Thompson
but
was
he
pretty
is
bad.
absolutely top three.
Yeah, right. And I believe we missed the thing end of last week, accidentally shaking his wife's hand somewhere at the debate, right? Was that it? I don't know. I caught that in passing too. He during one of the breaks in the debate went to the front of the stage to shake the hand of the governor and other visiting political dignitaries, and his wife was there in the front row.
Well,
and
she was probably wearing one of those costumes, and he didn't know who she was.
He just went straight
The ones
around.
where, like, she dresses up like Jackie Kennedy.
Oh, okay. Does she do that?
Yeah,
I did not know that.
yeah,
Better.
right down to the white opera gloves.
Wow. Well, maybe we just wanted to see the gloves up close.
You're right. Remember, they were really upset that like Vogue and Vanity Fair didn't have her on the cover.
You know what?
You remember
I
that
don't.
story?
No. Ron DeSantis. No, I don't remember anything about Ron DeSantis. No.
They felt she deserved it because she was a fashion icon,
I
because she
see.
dressed like Jackie Kennedy.
Sure. But then isn't that just an affirmation that it's Kennedy who is the icon? And
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, all right. You know what the problem is? That was plagiarism. So you can't have her on the cover because then you'd have to retract it, and then whoever published it would have to be fired. So it's a problem for everybody at that point.
I'm going to send you a picture,
Okay.
and you'll see what I'm talking about here.
I mean,
Hey?
I see what they think they're talking about, and I see the gloves,
Yeah.
but no, You know what it looks like? It reminds me very much of Donald Trump putting on white tie and tails.
I'll send you another.
She's got...
These are side to side of Jackie Kennedy and Casey DeSantis.
Yeah. But here again, she said, all right, well, here's a picture of Jackie Kennedy in a pink dress. I'll get a pink dress. Well, that's not pink. That's, I don't know, the fuchsia. I don't know. You tell me what color that is. It's not. And then she's wearing full-length white gloves. Now, full-length white gloves go up to the mid.
That's my favorite. The
upper
favorite
arm.
is the green cape.
Okay.
With
that one
gloves.
at least, that's cut like the Kennedy dresses. The other
anyway,
thing is
I'm trying to show
buys
you why
secondhand
they
bridesmaid
she should
dresses.
be on Vogue.
Well, she should not. She should be at Dave's bridal. For bridesmaid dresses is what it looks like to me. Yeah. The last one is the best one, but
anyway, I think
the kids look good.
Just add it to the pile of worst campaign ever. That's all.
Yeah, right. And no one ever thought DeSantis fashion ever, right? For either of them.
Himself? Oh, well, his boots.
Yeah.
That's
boots. An iconic thing. That's true, right? The big white boots. Yes, big
but they
white
have
gloves.
To have lips and heels, otherwise,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, all right. So they felt that she was entitled to the cover of Vogue. All right, well, no.
Me, I don't think so much anyway.
No. This is
meanwhile,
bargain basement
in real
garbage.
Life,
yes.
Today is the day that the E. Jean Carroll second defamation trial opens.
Terrific.
With a no-nonsense judge.
Today?
And Trump wants to make a statement, and I think the judge, Lewis Kaplan, says something along the lines of, okay, but, I'll give you a date. You can say whatever you want, but the trial is happening where it's happening. And Trump said, you have to delay the trial because, my wife's
mother.
Mom died.
Yeah, Melania's mother.
And so I have to go mourn with her. And the judge said, yeah, but you have a New Hampshire rally scheduled on the day you said that you were going to go mourn with your wife. No.
Well, there you go. Collateral estoppel. You can't do that.
That'll be interesting to watch.
Yes. And is it starting today
again,
on a holiday?
The E. Jean Carroll's already won $5 million for sexual abuse and subsequent denials. This is set defamation. And, the question is going to be how much does he get from this one? So this and everything else is going to be weighing down not on Iowa voters who don't care, right? And not even on GOP voters in writ large who don't care, but the general population. And one of the many, many situations that Trump's going to be in court or involved in court, and he can seek, instead of rallies, to use the court appearances as his way to make a splash. But we're now in the phase where, especially after the needle and Iowa, you can't ignore Trump, and so the media's going to have to start talking about him again. And just like Nikkki Haley, when you shine a light on her, she says stuff like, because of the Civil War, it had nothing to do with slavery. And so, not good, doesn't redound well to voters who aren't otherwise inclined to ignore everything. And these trials are going to make a difference, just like January 6th is going to make a difference.
Well, good. And, and now we're getting to that phase where they'll begin to make a difference, not only because the trials are progressing, but because the election season is progressing and people are getting that feeling of now is the time when I'm supposed to say I don't actually pay any attention. And then later I'm supposed to pay attention, but I'm paying attention to when I'm supposed to pay attention.
Yeah. So, for example, I think YouGov just had a recent poll, like in the last day or two, showing Biden and Trump tied. But if I recall, it was tied at high 30s.
Oh.
With a fifth of the population, more than 20%, saying, I don't know.
Yeah, so they were tied with a question mark.
So, in other words, if the public isn't engaged, there's no reason to really start talking about polling at this point. John Della Volpe pointed out that there was a youth vote poll that showed that Biden was like plus 37, but a significant number weren't completely committed to voting in the younger age group. And I looked at it and said, oh, like every election.
Yeah, right, true. That's the youths.
And again, the point, it's too early. There are still people, and the polls reflect this, there are still people who aren't
there
sure that Biden and Trump are going to be the nominees.
You know.
Well,
okay.
if you're one of those people, you don't know who you're going to vote for, do you?
I guess
you don't even know who the nominee is going to be.
I mean, well, but don't
Why
they
are we asking you? Well, you have
famously
to push
ask?
the undecided. You can't. Not yet. It's too early.
But aren't they? Don't they have great fun asking if the election were held today?
They love
or do
the
they
question.
stop doing that?
It's just a useless question. You know,
Well,
give it
yes.
a couple of more months.
It's not held today.
Wait till after the
I'm
needle.
not listening to you. Then what can the needle do for us in a primary? Or are they declaring the primary over and just saying we're going to, you know, the needle is
just like in
between
each
the two
individual
nominees.
state, there's an election. And you could say the probability that, you know, given what we know so far and given the votes that have been
Are they going
recorded
state
so
by state
far,
on needles?
this is the person who's most likely to win.
Right. Okay. I mean,
You know,
I don't
like
know.
all the rurals came in and Trump is ahead by 50 points. But we haven't heard from Des Moines yet,
Right.
where it's minus 13 degrees.
Well, I just thought the needle is kind of it's a bipolar situation, right? You know, it's either pointing one side or another, and in a
But what if it's
ostensibly
in the middle,
three-way.
slightly leaning to one side or another side? That's usually where it winds up,
Yeah.
and that's where, you know, then it
Well,
breaks.
that's the issue with the needle, but
That's the other issue with the needle, right?
But-
it was just starting to lean toward, and then it broke.
yeah. But like I don't know. I guess it's hard to really call this a regular primary, and even if it is really only like three candidates. But how does the needle account for the third, or is it just a Trump and others are the two poles of the needle? I don't. Or are they saying we're going to bring back the needle?
We're going to count votes.
As a
I mean, they have to announce votes at some point.
yes. I just didn't understand the application of the needle to it. I still
So
don't. Maybe that's why
once
everyone hates it.
Once you start announcing votes, you can needle it.
I guess so. All right, but then why not just wait for the answer?
But anyway, as Larry Sabato pointed out,
I'm
we already
confused.
know the winner of the Iowa caucus. It's the Democrats for not having one.
I guess so.
Minus
Yeah.
15 degrees. What are they, crazy?
When does Iowa vote for Democrats?
I don't know. Later.
Are they primarying instead?
You know,
or are they just not going
Bleeding
first?
Heartland and some of the other
I don't know.
blogs are talking about what happens on the Democratic side. And I have to be honest.
Okay.
I haven't been interested enough to look.
Well, yeah, it's a hard year to do that, but yeah, just from a process point of view, I guess I should take a peek and find out: are you caucusing but not going first, or are you also saying also to hell with caucuses? If we're not going first, we might as well just have a primary.
Well, you know, if you want to
Just vote at the Wendy's
think
drive-thru.
about process, you also have to remember if you are used to following the Democratic caucus with a threshold and below
Right,
which
yeah.
you have to resort and get into a different corner.
I am
and
sort of
some
used to
gyms
that.
have to be octagons so that there's a corner for everybody. That's not how they do it on the Republican side.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that rings a bell. I think they just beat you up or something and force you into one corner.
If you're not voting for who I want, I
Right.
invite you to step outside.
I guess so. And it's cold out there, so, you know, no one wants to go. But, all right, yeah, I forgot that they do have a certain different procedure, and now I can't remember what we learned about that. That's a tragedy. Well, next time.
Well, I'll send
Won't
you
apply
Laura
this time.
Bellin's C-SPAN
Okay.
piece on it if
That
you
way
want
we'll
to watch
know,
it later.
even though, you know, like we said, everybody's going to show up, and they'll be for Trump, and they'll beat up a few people who aren't, and then we'll see who gets third place. All right. I'll review that during the next, I don't know, day or two.
Campaign cycle.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. To the next time it counts for anything, and it may never count for anything because, yeah. All right. Well, never mind. Republican caucus procedures, I guess I can study it like the Whig Party as a part of history.
Right.
Okay.
So Ben Jacobs has this piece in New York Magazine. Ron DeSantis is being left out in the cold. Now the Florida governor is falling into third place in Iowa despite having exhaustively campaigned in the state, crisscrossing each of its 99 counties.
Yes.
Despite the fact that Trump lost in Iowa in 2016, the former president seems poised to win the state by an overwhelming margin this time.
Former
DeSantis had
president,
hoped
that's
to
the
use the
answer.
solidly social conservative state to land the first punch. Instead, he's already on the ropes. if you want to mix your metaphors there. It's about the weather. It's about boxing.
Boxing
Napoleon
Day.
didn't give up after Russia either, Ben Jacobs said.
Oh, okay.
But, whatever.
Yeah. But, Russia, who are we talking about even?
Napoleon. And
so is this
little Napoleon from Florida, has yet to see his Waterloo, I guess. Jonathan V. Last has a great piece in the Bulwark. Welcome to the Losers' Ball. The incentives explain why Ron DeSantis and Nikkki Haley are trying to avoid catastrophic success. And he's one of the agrees with me that, best thing to do is figure out how to get out. Ron DeSantis' campaign is over. It has been over since the first debate. Had he not gotten Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds to endorse him, DeSantis would have dropped out weeks ago. He's down to third place in national polling, 50 points behind Trump, and in New Hampshire it's worse.
Okay.
If you're Ron DeSantis, what are your incentives? Is to get out of this cluster fork as quick as possible, taking the least amount of damage, and there's a problem. He might finish second.
Womp womp. Oh, well. But that's another shot at getting his wife into the magazines. So
right. Here's the Della Volpe piece that I found. This is off from the Pundit Roundup. Super interesting poll from CBS News. Biden plus 27 versus Trump among voters less than 30, 62 to 35. Remember, he has a youth problem.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Except for where he doesn't.
Well, the problem
but
is
only
they don't
33% say they definitely will vote because it's so early.
Yeah, we don't know what's
going
to
happen. The campaign is to convince your voters to come out, something that Haley has grasped and DeSantis never did.
Haley grasped.
And Biden knows it. In fact, Biden knows it to the tune of pulling in $100 million this quarter, which is the biggest haul that any Democrat has ever had. And that money is going to be spent on, wait for it, get out the vote.
Yeah. Not today in the caucus,
because
that's Republicans. They'll wait for better weather elsewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, and getting out the general election vote.
Now, CBS had a head-to-head poll, and Biden was losing to DeSantis and Trump by like a point or two, basically a tie, but trailing Haley. You've seen that in other polls.
I've heard
And according to CBS, here's why Haley has such a lead over Biden. She draws more moderates and independents and more voters with college degrees than Trump does against Biden. Yes. And peels off more 2020 Biden supporters than either Trump or DeSantis does. And she also erases Mr. Biden's edge with women. What does that mean? It means nobody knows who Nikkki Haley is, and she's a generic Republican. That's what it means.
Okay, yeah, I guess that's right. That's a good way of putting it. Well,
everybody knows who Trump is.
They have no idea.
And by now, everybody knows who DeSantis is, so he can't pull that.
Yes.
But who the heck is Nikkki Haley? I don't know. Something about a Confederate flag that she took down in South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, that
generic Republican
will be good in their minds, sure. That will be a net positive. They'll remember that, and then though, I guess the last couple of weeks they will also. But I feel like she also said something wrong about the Civil War. Yeah, well, now that will resonate.
Yeah, and so her negatives start to go up, and you could see that in Iowa. In the Iowa polling, her negatives have soared. Why? Because while she attacks DeSantis, and DeSantis attacks her,
right?
Trump attacks Haley.
Yeah. Huh.
Is she going to be his vice president? No. He's already attacking her.
Guys.
He doesn't like that she's running against him.
Right.
What happens if Haley actually gets close to winning in New Hampshire, let alone win? Trump is going to blast her. And if it ever came to pass that she actually did win the nomination, Trump would take his voters and walk.
Very likely.
I mean the idea that therefore she's going to beat Biden is, what are you, a moron?
Yeah. All right. Well, that is.
Oh, but we have to write this because, we got this result and we have to tell you what the result is. Yeah, but put some context around it, guys.
That's true. That's a little much for them to do, to conceptualize. Well, I don't. So all our polling models fall apart because there's a third party effort.
That's
we don't know
why
what
Ann
to do
Seltzer
with that.
says, I don't do polling models. I just try to poll people and tell you what they say.
Yeah. Okay.
That's why she's so good, and that's why she's the gold standard in Iowa, and that's why it's not easily replicable everywhere else.
Right. Too many people to ask. Does she call everybody, or just one in every county, or we don't know?
She calls everybody in the New Hampshire legislature.
That's right. The 120,000 people in Iowa go to the caucuses, and 120,000 people in the New Hampshire legislature.
Yeah.
Easy. All right. well, unless you know what your budget's going to be.
Right. Meanwhile, another thing that's going on below the radar that people aren't reporting about, this is John King in Michigan Advanced. We talk about it on the show, so people here are going to be somewhat familiar with it.
Big
but I think it's
Michigan.
really important, remains important.
Rosalind McGregor helps us with that.
Troubled state GOP operations extend far beyond Michigan.
Oh.
Lackluster fundraising follows leadership fights and refusal to move on from 2020. So he's talking about Arizona, not just Michigan.
Yeah, they all have problems.
Sure, it's true. Christina Caramo and Melinda Pago are fighting probably now in court soon over who's the real chair of the Michigan Republican Party.
Yes.
Right, J. Miles Coleman, who's at the Larry Sabato's shop these days, says, it's not a surprise finances have become an issue in these party operations. If you're the Arizona Republican Party, instead of spending money on voter outreach or ads or field operations, you're spending millions of dollars on recounts.
Yeah. I mean, the dollars disappear when you spend them that way.
While it's true that former Chair Kelly Ward spent more than $300,000 on legal consulting fees, mostly related to lawsuits, she also authorized spending more than $530,000 on an election night party and bus tour for Trump-backed candidates, all of whom lost.
Wow.
If that's what you can do with the money, maybe I won't give you money.
Yeah.
In Minnesota,
that's
the state GOP at one point last year reported $53.81 in their bank account. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. That's you got to work hard to
largely
get to
blamed
that.
on the fallout surrounding the resignation of former chair Jennifer Carnahan in 2021 in the wake of a federal sex trafficking scandal connected to a prominent donor.
I don't remember that.
Colorado's GOP was unable to pay for any staff member early in 2023 after the incoming chair accused the previous leadership of leaving the party in debt to its landlord to the tune of $9,000 in unpaid back rent, and questionable legal fees were still entangling. Williams, an ardent election denier, then sued the state over its primary system, an effort led by attorney John Eastman, yada, yada, yada. Then Florida, of course, you know about Florida. Chairman Christian Ziegler amid an investigation of an alleged sexual battery against a woman in Sarasota, part of a threesome.
Yep.
And while the state GOP had retained huge fundraising advantage, the scandal has given a ray of hope to Democrats seeking to deliver the Sunshine State to Biden. That's probably not going to happen, but, that definitely a Dems in disarray story, except it's not the Dems.
Yeah. It's going to have to be bigger than a threesome to change the voting outcome. But okay. Yeah, all right. Well, that's an interesting story, and I got to catch up on the ones I missed. But
wow. Matt Dallek, political historian with GWU, says that Dallek said that while there's no single cause for the dysfunction being seen in state parties, one obvious factor is Trump's tended to favor loyalty over competency, resulting in chaos and lack of professionalism.
That sounds like one explanation to me.
Right? Who's the incompetent jerk who we had as acting attorney general for a few weeks?
Oh, the guy with the toilets. Yeah, Matt
something.
Yeah, totally erased from memory. I'll ask Marcy.
The quality of candidate and leadership that a lot of the state parties have, because if you're a Trumper, that's who you are.
Yeah, I mean the point has been made crystal clear through all of our reporting from Rosalind about Christina Caramo, and she's not actually the worst and craziest in the country. And, well, they got problems. And some of them are their candidates for statewide office, like Carrie Lake in Arizona, plus the rest of the party.
So then you turn around and say, well, how come Biden's pulling in all this money and the Republicans aren't? And there's two reasons. One is the dysfunction within the Republican Party, and the other is Trump would take all the money anyway.
That's true. There is probably a huge, much bigger grift problem. Not only Trump stealing and misdirecting so much money, but encouraging other people to do the same, opening the door for them to do the same. And then even when they're not, if they're actually working on something, occasionally the other groups that want to grift money get jealous of the ones who are pulling in money and accuse them of grifting, and then their ability to do things, if they ever had any, falls apart because they have to defend themselves.
So, it would make a difference in places like Michigan or Arizona. Better? It's not going to make a difference in Florida. It's not going to make a difference in Ohio. But those that are actually close races might matter.
And there are also pockets of, when you're talking about state parties, like if a state party in Florida falls into disarray, it doesn't do much to deliver the state into the column of Democrats in the Electoral College, but local races, congressional races, things where things can make a difference in marginal districts where the party could have stepped in and, say, either saved an incumbent or flipped a seat.
Even Senate races, see Arizona.
Yes, right, true also. More difficult perhaps in Florida than Arizona, but it doesn't all have to happen in Florida. Florida may be a lost cause, but occasionally you'll pick a few seats will change hands. Democratic candidates will win in county-wide offices, only to then later be illegally fired by the governor, but they'll have a case in court. Look, anywhere you can leave a Republican state party underwater is a great thing.
Right. Anyway, that's it for me. It's 21 degrees according to my computer outside my door, and I'm going to try and stay warm because, Des Moines is colder.
Yeah, right. Well, you get to brag on that and have a relatively balmy day at 21 degrees.
Yeah,
you're still 30 degrees above
marshmallows
what they're doing
outside at the fire pit.
Yeah. Well, so there are people who would do that even in
shorts.
Yeah, kids today. Not only will they not show up at the polls, they don't wear pants. I can't understand this. I was just on the college campus the other day. It's freezing, not Iowa freezing, but freezing cold out, and the number of kids love shorts. I don't know what it is, but it's always been true. All right, thanks, Greg. We'll catch up with you on Wednesday. When does the weather turn in Iowa? Does it matter if it happens after
does it turn to what? We'll have to look at the needle.
Yeah, I guess so. All right. Well, the results of the caucus would be funny if it took a long, long time to count them and Trump had to concede that it was fraud or something like that. But all right. Well, they do total it all up because they're there in person and there's no, I guess, ballot fraud. But they do have procedural fights occasionally, at least on the Democratic side. I'll have to read the thing you provided me from Laura Bellin to figure out whether they can have a procedural fight on the Republican side. All right, Wednesday it is. Excellent. See you then, and all eyes will then be on New Hampshire briefly before we all look away.
We'll know where the needle landed, at least in Iowa.
You love that needle. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, we'll wait for Wednesday to hear from Greg again. Here's a story, though, that I know he was anxious to get in front of you. So am I. I actually saw this thing over the weekend, too. Is this? This is the Wall Street Journal version of it. Did I save a different version of it? Because I don't subscribe, but I'm pretty sure I put aside a different one. But even so, remember that last week we spoke at some point briefly about we allowed ourselves to pay some attention to the fallout from the Harvard presidency tussle, I guess, and tarring of the Harvard president over charges of plagiarism, which were, disputed. People argued about whether or not what was being alleged even constituted plagiarism, etc. But the big fallout from that was that, what's his name? Bill Acker, who I think we kept, or Ackman. I think we kept saying Bill Acker, and it's Ackman. And I think I even have a note here from one of the listeners saying, hey, you keep saying the wrong name here. And I don't know whether we were saying Acker or Ackerman or what, but Bill Ackman, the billionaire hedge fund kind of guy who I guess is on the board at Harvard and was the major mover behind this pressure to oust the president. And then, of course, there was this accusation, which I guess it didn't take much to anticipate that this was going to happen, but the accusation was, by your standards of what defines plagiarism, it turns out that your wife, who was for a time a professor at MIT, among many other issues that surrounded her tenure there, may also have plagiarized to some extent in her doctoral dissertation. And because he was a billionaire, he vowed to, remember this? He vowed to push back and he was going to fight, and I'm going to investigate. This was Business Insider had published this story. And Business Insider, you may recall, Greg informed us, was owned by German-based media conglomerate Axel Springer, which turned out to be both the name of the person who founded the company. I was walking down the street and I founded it on the street, right? Okay. Here it is. I've got a company. And then the company was named after him, and it was a little bit confusing, referring to it that way. But at any rate, Greg was a little bit concerned because they were pushing back on Axel Springer, and Axel Springer said, we will, maybe because you're a billionaire and you've got superpowers because of all your money, we will review our story and our reporting and take another look at it. And it sort of looked like they were going to bend to the will of this billionaire and get out of his way and maybe apologize in some fashion for having accused his wife of plagiarism. But as it turns out, they made a Barbra Streisand problem for themselves, because this report, which I can only take a quick peek at the headline of because it's in Wall Street Journal, and I thought I put this aside, but who knows what icon this might be hiding behind in pocket. But the gist of the story anyway is Axel Springer now stands by Business Insider's reporting on Bill Ackman's wife, Neri Oxman. Media company reviewed the reporting process behind the stories on the alleged plagiarism, and basically came to the conclusion that I saw over the weekend that they were announcing. Actually, we looked at it. The reporting is solid, and the accusations of plagiarism are substantial and solid as well. So we're going to stand by it. So I guess Bill Ackman didn't get what he wanted out of that one. But now, of course, he's pledging to burn his entire fortune, fighting against this somehow anyway. And I don't know whether, he's serious or whether he'll give up after a few hours or days or what. But I guess we have to wait and see how this will play out. I will mark the Wall Street Journal article for inclusion in Pocket. And then I'll take you on a tour through the rest of the things that I put away in Pocket. We'll see whether we get to stray from news recap at all today, or whether we have to wait for later in the week, because there's some fascinating non-news articles that I came across over the weekend too that I'd really love to share with you. But as I said, there are other things to get to, and we'll have to do that and see how much time is left. And maybe along the way, I'll discover the other story of, or the other reporting of Axel Springer's decision. One thing I want to note from over the weekend. Well, let's see. There are at least two things. One story I want to at least get on the record and just say, yes, I have heard this one, and yes, we'll have to hear more about it. Texas has a lot of problems going on, not just the weather. A bigger story, I think, among progressive sources over the weekend from out of Texas. I have the CBS News report on it here that Texas, quote, this is in the headline, quote, physically barred Border Patrol agents, which is an unusual thing usually for Texas to do, but they physically barred Border Patrol agents from trying to rescue migrants who drowned, federal officials say. That is the headline. We are looking at the report at CBS News from Camilo Montoya Galvez, and the story is a confusing and procedural one in a way, but of course underlying it all, the actual facts of people drowning trying to cross the Rio Grande. A woman and two children, in fact, drowned in the Rio Grande on Friday while trying to enter the U.S. near a section of the southern border where Texas National Guard soldiers, this is the issue, Texas National Guard soldiers have prevented federal Border Patrol agents from processing and rescuing migrants. I guess at the heart of this is, well, it comes in a paragraph from now. But let me get through this one here. I'll set it up. I'll read it the way the CBS folks have laid it out. Federal officials and a Texas congressman said National Guard soldiers deployed by Republican Texas Governor Greg Abbott did not allow Border Patrol agents to attempt to rescue the migrants. Texas officials denied the claims on Sunday, so we can't even get at, like, what are the facts here. But, I mean, the facts are that 3 people are dead. Earlier this week, Texas National Guard soldiers abruptly seized control of a public park in Eagle Pass that the Border Patrol, had been using to hold migrants, marking the latest escalation in an intensifying political and legal feud between Abbott and President Biden over U.S. border policy. I mean, it's been a lot of rhetoric lately, and I think we may have noted at the end of last week that Abbott had, said something new and outrageous and egregious about migrants. In fact, saying something along the lines of, well, if it was up to us, we would do everything we can to keep them from crossing the border. We'd even shoot them to keep them from crossing the border. But if we did that, then the tyrants in the Biden administration, the federal government would charge us with murder. Well, yeah, they would, because that would be murder. And, that's what we do with things like that. And I did note, and maybe I even told you last week, like, well, that's the same reason that we don't shoot Texas governors with big mouths, is that people would charge us with murder if we did that, because that's what it would be. And that's why we don't do things like that. And that's why we don't say we want to do things like that either, because that makes you a bad person. But I guess he's locked in this dispute where, once again, there was the construction of the razor wire and float barrier across the Rio Grande that the Texas government attempted to put up in, again, defiance of the federal sphere of control over the question of immigration. And they just said, well, we don't care, we're going to do it. And they were swiftly slapped down in court, but maybe they're just more about the stunt than actually winning. And now this one, too. We're going to have a showdown between federal and state officials and attempt to assert control over certain areas in the name of the state that they really have no authority to do. And in the meantime, there's also going to be a death count attached to it now, starting with these 3. So on Friday night, Border Patrols identified 6 migrants in the Rio Grande who were in distress near this park that the Texas National Guard had taken over, known as Shelby Park. Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar said in a statement on Saturday. Federal agents, Cuellar added, unsuccessfully attempted to contact Texas state officials about the emergency by phone. Then, when Border Patrol agents went to the park and asked to be allowed to render aid to the migrants, they were denied entry, according to Cuellar. And again, here's the sort of thing where I thought that, generally speaking, just as a kid, growing up, like, I thought if you stormed the Capitol that the police would stop you. But apparently that isn't true. And that if there was a confrontation between state and federal officials when it comes to enforcing federal law, federal officials would win because they would knock you the hell out and move you aside. But apparently that's not true either. So, interesting. Texas Military Department soldiers, the story continues, stated that they would not grant access to the migrants, even in the event of an emergency, and that they would send a soldier to investigate the situation. Cuellar said, noting that Mexican officials recovered 3 bodies on Saturday, and they didn't need anybody's permission to do it either. This is a tragedy, and the state bears responsibility, he added. A U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, that is, official who requested anonymity because they were not authorized to talk to the press, but did anyway, I guess, said Cuellar's description of the events was accurate. In a statement Saturday, the Department of Homeland Security said Texas officials obstructed Border Patrol's attempts to rescue the migrants on Friday. Tragically, a woman and 2 children drowned last night in the Shelby Park area of Eagle Pass, which was commandeered by the state of Texas earlier this week. the department said. In responding to a distress call from the Mexican government, Border Patrol agents were physically barred by Texas officials from entering the area. White House spokesperson Angelo Hernandez, that's a mouthful for you, said Texas soldiers blocked U.S. Border Patrol from attempting to provide emergency assistance to the migrants. It's not a great time in the world for soldiers blocking the application of humanitarian aid, is it? While we continue to gather facts about the circumstances of these tragic deaths, one thing is clear. Governor Abbott's political stunts are cruel, inhumane, and dangerous. Hernandez added. That is really something. But, okay, that's the way we do expanded surnames in the Spanish language. It's just, that's the culture. So even when you end up doing rhyming names like Hernandez. Okay, the Texas Military Department, which oversees the state National Guard, confirmed in a statement on Saturday that it was contacted by Border Patrol on Friday night in reference to a migrant distress situation. It said one of its units actively searched the river with lights and night vision goggles, but found no migrants in distress or bodies. The State National Guard soldiers ended their search after detecting Mexican officials responding to an incident on the Mexico side of the riverbank, the Texas Military Department added. According to the department, Border Patrol said Mexican authorities did not need help. The Texas Military Department maintains water rescue equipment and actively works with local EMS to aid migrants needing medical care, the department said, anyway, in its statement late Saturday, but they weren't very helpful. I guess on Sunday, the Texas Military Department issued a second statement, this time disputing the assertions of federal officials. Claims that the Texas Military Department prevented Border Patrol from saving the lives of drowning migrants are wholly inaccurate, the department said. When Border Patrol requested access to Shelby Park on Friday, federal agents informed National Guard soldiers that Mexican officials were recovering the body of 2 drowned migrants, according to the Texas Military Department. Border Patrol specifically requested access to the park to secure 2 additional migrants that were presumed to have traveled with the deceased, though had crossed to the boat ramp. Okay, the Texas Military Department said, adding that one of the migrants was turned over to state troopers while the other was transferred to emergency medical services due to hypothermic conditions. The Texas National Guard took control of Shelby Park late Wednesday, saying it was an operation designed to deter illegal crossings by migrants. The drastic move alarmed local officials in Eagle Pass, who said they did not approve it, as well as the federal government, which alerted the Supreme Court of Texas's actions, the Supreme Court, I guess, of the United States, of Texas's actions, not the Supreme Court of Texas, but the Supreme Court of the United States of Texas's actions overnight on Thursday. Federal officials said Texas has used armed soldiers, vehicles, and fences to physically block Border Patrol agents and at least 1 federal National Guard soldier from accessing roughly 2.5 miles of the U.S.-Mexico border. One of the concerns raised by federal officials in a filing before the Supreme Court was that Texas's action would prevent Border Patrol from helping migrants in distress. And then it turns out to be 100% true. On Saturday, DHS called on Texas officials to relent. Texas's blatant disregard for federal authority over immigration poses grave risks, the department said. The state of Texas should stop interfering with the U.S. Border Patrol's enforcement of U.S. laws, which they should do anyway, yes, and the fact that it's also costing lives, well, that will impact Greg Abbott not at all in terms of his thinking, but the rest of the country, perhaps. Not Republicans, but everyone else. Okay. Well, an interesting situation that you have to keep an eye on there, and we'll see how they resolve that dispute between federal and state officials. But when they say they physically prevented them, I mean, did they actually say, well, if you go in there, we'll tackle you, arrest you, shoot you? Not quite clear what they threatened to do. All right. Well, with that story on the record, we can turn our attention to the other one that I mentioned to you at the beginning of the show, how Charlie Kirk and his Turning Point USA group have plans to finally abandon the charade of pretending that Martin Luther King was a hero to them because of one line in one speech that they know about, even while claiming that if he were alive today, he would have been a Republican. And I guess no one was buying that, so they're just going back to actually he was wrong and terrible. And here's why. How Charlie Kirk plans to discredit Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Act together. That's the idea, of course, as reported in Wired magazine by William Turton. Just at the end of last week, Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk, the subheader says, is preparing to launch a campaign against MLK. Seems like a good time for that, don't you think? MLK Day. And the landmark civil rights law he helped enact. And we'll see whether human thumbprint Charlie Kirk can make any inroads on this. Conservative activist and Turning Point USA co-founder Charlie Kirk has a lot of opinions on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In fact, several contradicting ones, I'm sure. In 2015, here it is. Kirk called him a hero, because that was fashionable to do at the time for Republicans. A hero based on one line in one speech. In 2022, MLK was a civil rights icon, according to Kirk. And in December of 2023, speaking before a group of students and teachers at America Fest, a political convention organized by Turning Point USA, Kirk struck a different tone. And this is a quick turnaround. Quote, MLK was awful, Kirk said. He's not a good person. He said one good thing he actually didn't believe. You see, they've figured out Martin Luther King better than King or anyone else has ever done. For decades, conservatives have pointed to King and his idea that people should, quote, and here's their one line, not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, unquote, as a model for equality. But of course, now Republicans have come to realize that they don't like equality. So how are we going to rid ourselves of this person? For a while, it says, quote, Dr. King's stock was very much on the rise in conservative circles and the Republican Party, says John Wood Jr., a Republican activist. It's been understood on the right that even though Dr. King wasn't really one of us politically, although they've been trying to make people think that since forever, he was still a, quote, good liberal. For Kirk, the shift on King wasn't an offhand remark, but a glimpse into his broader strategy, if there is one, to discredit the civil rights leader and the landmark legislation most associated with King, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And there might be, in fact, a strategy. I have a very, very radical view on this, he tells us, but I can defend it. He also tells us, it's another claim, and I've thought about it, and I don't believe any part of that statement. Kirk said at America Fest, we made a huge mistake when we passed the Civil Rights Act in the 1960s. He's like 15 years old. Turning Point USA, founded in 2012 by an 18-year-old Kirk to organize conservative students on college campuses, has grown into an ideological force in right-wing politics. America Fest, which took place at a convention center in downtown Phoenix, featured speeches by right-wing heavyweights Donald Trump Jr., Tucker Carlson, heavyweights, and U.S. Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida. Those are not heavyweights, but okay. Nearly 20,000 people attended the 4-day event, according to Kirk. Closely aligned with Donald Trump, the group has been seen as a way to replace the modern Republican establishment with younger people more aligned with the 45th U.S. president, maybe sort of, and reactionary politics. Kirk argues that the Civil Rights Act, which bars discrimination on the basis of race, ushered in a permanent DEI-type bureaucracy, referring to diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is their new griping point. It used to be CRT, but they realized nobody understood what CRT was. But then doesn't matter because really they all, before that, most of the activists who are angry about DEI, who were previously angry about CRT, actually started by being mad about masks and vaccines and have little to no understanding of what it is they are protesting now. Anyway. But because Martin Luther King spoke for at least equality, and that's E, or nearly, it's the same root as equity, I guess, and that's enough for them. And they figure, okay, time to make Martin Luther King bad. For Republicans, make him bad again. He illustrated how the law has gone wrong. Did he? Or did he just complain about things? When responding to a question from a student who said they became the subject of a Title IX investigation after posting an Instagram story mocking transgender people. And why did you have to do that? You didn't have to. It was your choice. Now you're in trouble. Title IX, which was passed as part of the Education Amendments of 1972, bans schools that receive federal funding from discriminating on the basis of sex. King was assassinated 4 years prior in 1968. So it's not the most direct connection I've ever seen in my life, and I think that's what they're saying. The courts have been really weak on this, Kirk told the America Fest crowd. Federal courts just yield to the Civil Rights Act as if it's the actual American Constitution, because after all, it's federal legislation duly enacted and having the force of law in America, and that's not enough for me. Anyway, the law is ultimately a way to refound the country, although it looks like they have actually got a typo here. I don't think they meant refound the county. I think they mean refound the country. And some people have said as much. You know, that's not entirely untrue. It's just, it's still valid, and you lost that vote. And hey, it was refounded in your face. Sorry. And he says, a way to get rid of the First Amendment, of course, according to Kirk. And we've done a great job getting rid of that, haven't we? Kirk's attempt to discredit civil rights law is an example of how the fringe moves to the center at the speed of light in right-wing politics, says public policy scholar Jonathan Rauch. If they're going to say the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was the death of the Constitution and freedom in America, then that's going to be extremely divisive. Because a lot of people are going to say, well, if that isn't racist, I don't know what is, Rauch says. This is the federal law that ended segregation. King supported the Civil Rights Act and was an architect of it, Rauch adds. I guess if you're going to go down this road, you have to say that King was wrong and maybe King is a bad person. Kirk's comments at America Fest were merely a preview of his attacks on King. He recently said that he plans to release content to discredit MLK. Ooh, he's going to release content on January 15th, King's birthday, which is a U.S. federal holiday honoring King. We're going to be hitting him next week, Kirk said on his podcast this week, which was actually now last week. Yeah, on the day of the Iowa caucus. It's MLK Day. We're going to do the thing you're not supposed to do. We're going to tell the truth about MLK Jr. You better tune in next week. Blake has already been preparing. It's going to be great. So look out, because Blake's on the case. Blake is an apparent reference to Blake Neff, a producer of the Charlie Kirk show. In 2020, Neff resigned from his job at Fox News as Tucker Carlson's top writer after CNN revealed he had been making racist posts under a pseudonym because of how brave he is. Fox News CEO Suzanne Scott called Neff's posts abhorrent. Neff has also been publicly laying the groundwork for rewriting the history on King, attempting to link him to violent unrest after the passing of the Civil Rights Act. Martin Luther King Jr. gets praised for being a peaceful activist, Neff said on Jack Posobiec's Human Events Daily podcast in December. But what they always end up glossing over is actually Martin Luther King here. In the mid-'60s and late 60s, civil rights activism becomes a very violent thing. A spokesperson for TPM, no, that's the good people. That's Talking Points, but TPUSA, which I should remember because the break comes after the TP, which reminds me of toilet paper, which reminds me of them. A spokesperson for TPUSA, Andrew Colvett, said that Americans have been fed a fake history. A core part of this fake history of America is the elevation of MLK into a saint whose entire being is beyond reproach and above question. That's not actually true. Colvett said in an emailed statement, this sanctified version of MLK strips away his actual views and ignores his actual actions. The real MLK was a complicated person. Well, the real MLK said more things than that one speech and that one line in that one speech. The attacks on King show how Turning Point USA has become more willing to indulge on more extreme issues that can alienate voters, according to Nick Sergi, the executive director of Watchdog Group Documented, who has researched Turning Point USA for years. A decade ago, when he was launching TP USA, Kirk avoided hot-button issues like race or abortion, Sergey says. He now seems totally unrestrained, and I can understand why. He's increasingly radical and is aligning himself with people like Blake Neff, who exist in a particular subculture on the right. This is not dog whistle politics. It's blatant and intended to cause outrage. That's really the point. I guess that's the point, the turning point of everything. Even for Kirk and Turning Point USA, the attacks on King represent a dramatic shift. The group has profited from the use of King's image. Turning Point USA's website sold a $55 t-shirt with MLK's name and stickers of King that say, "Let Freedom Ring." After an inquiry from Wired, both products were removed from TP USA's store. That's an odd twist, don't you think? Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time, just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Got one more segment for today, and luckily a whole week ahead of us. So some choices to make about which direction to go. And, well, there is actually one last line to this whole story. I was so close to finishing it up, but that was a remarkable reveal, actually, in the few seconds before the entry into the break, that Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA used to cash in on the MLK legacy by selling their own t-shirts with his name and I guess stickers of King that say "Let Freedom Ring," and then they realized, we're going to attack this guy. So they, we cashed in as much as we could, and now we'll pull the things to avoid the charges of hypocrisy. But hey, too late. But anyway, this last comment, again from Jonathan Rauch, these guys are very good at moving the Overton window, he says. That's what they do. They push and get things into the dialogue that until the day before yesterday were unthinkable. So that's what Charlie Kirk is trying to be about, just sort of being the guy that introduces these, radical, reactionary, right-wing concepts. Because, otherwise, I guess he's pretty irrelevant. Having founded a campus conservatives organization at the age of 18, before he had spent any time on campus, of course, back in 2012. Now it is more than a decade later, and he's entering, hello fellow kids territory at this point. So I guess he's decided to take on the point of the spear here in the anti-MLK charge. So far, I haven't heard much about it, but it's early on January 15th, and it's going to be a day or two before we find out what horrific things Charlie Kirk said to a horrific audience of people we don't care about very much later on today. All right. So, let's see. There's a number of other stories, some of which are small and quick and ought to be mentioned, but then there's also this sort of very interesting story that is lengthier. Gosh, would we be able to get through all of this? I mean, I'm going to, maybe I'll turn to it in a minute. I feel like I got to run through a couple of the courtroom developments that are shaping up. As Greg mentioned, there will be the resumption of Phase 2 of the second E. Jean Carroll case today, dealing, I guess, more specifically with the defamation charges, which provides Trump with another opportunity to try to give a closing argument in a case. And as I mentioned at the end of last week, this time Carroll's lawyers are specifically warning the judge in that case, hey, we've all seen what he did in the case before Judge Engoron, the civil fraud case, and very purposefully avoided responding to the judge about what restrictions were necessary on a closing statement, and then went ahead and speechified in a way that's going to violate all the rules in that case and would violate all the rules in this case. And you really need to take prophylactic measures ahead of time in order to prevent this from happening and to prevent Trump from turning this trial into a circus. And this trial, or this phase of this trial, also very analogous to the one in the civil fraud case. The substantive question of Trump's guilt has been established. This is only supposed to focus on the penalty phase, I guess. And once again, it would be against the rules to be introducing new evidence, et cetera, but Trump is expected to try to do that anyway. And so it's a very interesting thing procedurally that the lawyers are doing here. And it's necessary, but I just don't, there's just nothing robust enough out there besides a pledge, say, from the judge, who is not going to make this pledge ahead of time and may not execute it in the time, the critical moment either. But essentially, banging the gavel loudly and having bailiffs remove him and whisk him away immediately in contempt of court. That's how you should deal with it. But of course, Trump is kind of looking for that treatment, although, maybe it's about time to say, Trump's not the best strategist in the world. Maybe what if we gave him exactly what he thought he was looking for and it ended up working out badly for him? What would that look like? I don't know. But at any rate, along those lines, I did put aside a couple of things. Let's see. Joshua Friedman, ubiquitous again, I always say on Blue Sky, providing us with E. Jean Carroll's attorney's request to Judge Kaplan to take, as I said, quote, robust prophylactic measures in case Trump decides he wants to testify at trial, citing his conduct in Judge Engoron's courtroom as a cautionary tale. It's a lengthy letter about that. All right, well, it's on the record. You can read it for yourself, I suppose. But again, it's just not clear that there's anything that any judge or court would be willing to do that will be effective against tactics like Trump's, especially if he's willing to, look like he's going to be a martyr. Just by way of describing where they stand in this case, I could offer you this piece from Salon magazine from the end of last week by, Tatiana Tendanpoli, maybe? I'm guessing at the pronunciation of that. Last name, apologies if I got it wrong, but here's the rundown. This trial will not be a do-over. That's a quote. The judge bans Trump from denying he sexually abused E. Jean Carroll. That's already been decided, right? So you can't make that part of your testimony in this phase of the trial. The judge overseeing the case has shut down Trump's bid to interject attacks at trial, but is going to allow the use by the plaintiff's attorneys of the Access Hollywood tape. That's very interesting. And quickly, the rundown on this, just so you understand what's at stake now in this proceeding. A federal judge on Tuesday last week delivered a scathing order. How scathing? I don't know. Effectively blocking former President Donald Trump from employing the go-to moves of his litigation playbook ahead of his second E. Jean Carroll defamation trial in New York, which is set to begin next week. Now, this week, Trump's lawyers had initially prepped for the upcoming trial as if the first case brought by the ex-columnist hadn't happened, according to the Daily Beast's Jose Pagliari, who viewing it as a redo and a chance at vindication for the former president after a jury concluded last year that he sexually abused Carroll in the mid-1990s, but U.S. District Court Judge Lewis Kaplan intercepted that plan Tuesday, establishing that this proceeding would not be rehashing whether he assaulted Carroll. In other words, the material facts concerning the alleged sexual assault already have been determined, and this trial will not be a do-over of the previous trial, Kaplan said in a 27-page order. The federal judge outlined that the jury in the upcoming trial will only be deciding on how much in damages Trump will fork over for defaming Carroll while serving as president in 2019, when he denied the sexual assault, saying he couldn't have raped her because she was not his type, and accusing her of fabricating the assault to promote her upcoming memoir that last year's jury ruled did happen. That jury awarded Carroll a total of $5 million in damages. The new jury will traverse Trump's decades of misogyny as they review the most damning evidence against him, including that Access Hollywood tape where he, remember that one, brags about being able to, quote, grab them by the pussy, and his recorded deposition where he celebrates getting away with sexual assault, unfortunately or fortunately. I'm not even sure what that actually is, but okay. Kaplan's Tuesday order, that is, barred Trump from making further denials about the facts in the lawsuit, snatching out the crux of the former president's litigation plan. Mr. Trump and his counsel are precluded in the presence of the jury from claiming that Trump did not sexually abuse, quote, rape, there's parentheses, quote, rape, Ms. Carroll, that he did not make his 2019 statements concerning Ms. Carroll with actual malice, or that Ms. Carroll fabricated her account. The judge wrote, adding further that Trump can't claim that he didn't believe Carroll was telling the truth about the 1990s encounter. Kaplan also barred discussions of DNA, a major point of contention for the Trump team in last year's case that Kaplan dubbed the Long Saga. Upon first revealing her claims against Trump in a New York Magazine column, Carroll made clear that she had kept the black coat dress she wore the evening Trump assaulted her in the dressing room of the Manhattan Bergdorf Goodman department store. Her lawyers had it tested for human DNA samples, with the California laboratory finding several, but the former president refused to take a test that held the potential of matching his genetic material to what remained on the coat. As a result, the trial proceeded based on both parties' recollection of the incident and this swath of first-hand accounts that Trump had also attacked other women over the years. Trump offered at the 11th hour to finally get tested ahead of the first trial start, but the judge seemed to interpret the move as a bad faith maneuver to sway the public eye after the evidence exchange had completed. In the upcoming trial, Kaplan forbade Trump from even alluding to the subject in front of the jury, citing his own unjustified refusal to provide a sample of his own DNA on a timely basis. Trump putting forth the argument that there is no conclusive scientific proof that he committed the assault would obscure the fact that Mr. Trump himself is the primary reason why there is no DNA comparison evidence in this case, Kaplan wrote, determining that bringing up the lack of DNA evidence would be fundamentally unfair and substantially prejudicial to Carroll. Unlike their client, who has repeatedly flung insults at Carroll and recently went on a social media tirade against the writer, Trump's attorneys are also barred from discussing her past romantic relationships, implying that she's pursuing a political aim in suing Trump, or mentioning how she chose her lawyer. In the order, the judge rejected Trump's argument that Carroll hiring attorney Roberta Kaplan, a high-profile lawyer who once argued before the Supreme Court in favor of same-sex marriage, contributed to the negative attention she received when the former president defamed her. That claim, the judge found, was unpersuasive and lacked any merit. Kaplan further banned the lawyers from informing the jurors in any capacity about how Carroll was funding her lawsuit. Court filings last year showed that Democrat megadonor and LinkedIn billionaire Reid Hoffman has been financially supporting Carroll's case. Mr. Trump's position on this issue is no stronger now than it was in Carroll 2, Kaplan wrote, of Trump's counsel leveling an argument about Carroll's litigation funding, adding, the prejudice inherent in such an exercise would outweigh substantially any probative value. The judge's prohibitions shield the jurors from the rage-filled commentary prevalent on Trump's Truth Social account, while essentially derailing much of Trump's plans to finally testify at his trial after skipping the first one, raising the risks of what the former president stands to lose. So, all right, that frames up exactly what's at stake and what's the procedural posture of this case, and what Trump had hoped to do with testimony at this case, despite the fact that he would offer none in the previous case. So, we'll see whether there's any actual prophylactic value to any measures that can be taken ahead of time, short of at least a promise to himself to actually enforce the latitude that judges have in hauling people out of court and holding them in contempt and putting them in the lockup. But the likelihood of that is admittedly pretty low. All right, but that's what's at stake coming up in this case today. And given what we saw Judge Engoron must certainly have anticipated a wild scene in the courtroom by allowing Trump, well, he didn't allow Trump, but by having Trump give a closing statement. But yeah, it should serve as a warning to Judge Kaplan that Judge Engoron fully, apparently, intended not to allow it and then ended up having to allow it because there was nothing he could do or nothing he would do to stop it. I don't know why. I don't know what interest he thought he was serving, but it did happen, and I guess you should anticipate it happening in this one too. And this time there will be a jury, and they can instruct them to ignore it, and they might even do a good job at ignoring it. But it poses a pretty substantial risk here. All right, let's see. Other stories. Then there are a couple others, and it seems like. Yeah, well, maybe we'll give some time over to the longer story that I discovered that I thought might follow nicely from Charlie Kirk's. But one more piece of housekeeping that I want to throw in there. You remember at the end of last week I mentioned the weird thing about how the military names its operations, and my recollection that maybe from the first Gulf War that they finally kind of abandoned the claim that there was no connection between political messaging or even military messaging and the names of the operations. And they abandoned that fictional line. I found a story on it from a publication called Government Technology, where you'll find it govtech.com. And it's a 2014 article, November 25th, 2014. Just thought I would share it with you, just procedurally, you might find it of interest. How the Pentagon names military operations was the headline. Until 25 years ago, now I guess 35 years ago, the U.S. military issued random code names for exercises, landing beaches, headquarters, attack plans, and other operations, but impliedly that has changed. By way of historical background, the article begins, during World War II, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill urged military leaders to come up with valiant names for battles so that no mother of a fallen soldier need say that her son was killed, quote, in an operation called Bunny Hug or Ballyhoo. I guess that's not really the tops on their lists, but okay. More than 70 years later, Pentagon officials faced a similar problem when they struggled to choose an operational name for the widening campaign of airstrikes against the Islamic State militants in Iraq and Syria. The branding effort took weeks, involved a classified Pentagon computer system called Nikkka, N-I-C-K-A. I don't know what it stands for. Consultations with military officers in Baghdad and Washington, approval by 24 partner nations, and the endorsement of top Pentagon brass. Thus was born, remember the awesome outcome of this one? Operation Inherent Resolve. A moniker so inherently bland that it sparked jokes on late-night TV. Until 25 years ago, the U.S. military issued random code names for exercises, landing beaches, headquarters, attack plans, and other operations, from Aberdeen, an Allied objective in Burma in World War II, to Zipper, another World War II attack plan. The point was to protect secrecy, confuse the enemy, and simplify communications. A few were poetic in a military sort of way. The Pentagon called its heavy bombing of North Vietnam from 1965 to 1968 Operation Rolling Thunder, a name that proved so popular it was adopted by a veterans advocacy group, a 1977 movie, an annual motorcycle rally, and a Bob Dylan concert tour. Others didn't prove so trendy. Operation Killer, that seems pretty straightforward, and Operation Ripper, a double-barreled counteroffensive early in the Korean War, were widely criticized as crude, even though the attacks succeeded, and Operation Masher, a 1966 U.S.-led assault in South Vietnam, drew so many jibes it was renamed Operation White Wing. But for every U.S.-led combat operation in Vietnam named Inferno, Gladiator, or Dragonfire, U.S. troops were also sent on lethal missions named Flip-Flop, Hopscotch, and Jingle Bells. The practice of naming military operations is believed to have begun in World War I. Germany branded missions with religious and mythological titles, including Valkyrie and Archangel. Churchill appreciated those examples. In 1943, he dictated a note that said, in part, that operations in which large numbers of men may lose their lives should not be given names that are too boastful, too despondent, or of a frivolous character. He urged commanders to use heroes of antiquity, figures from Greek and Roman mythology, the constellations and stars, famous racehorses, okay, sure, or names of British and American war heroes. Churchill personally chose Operation Overlord for the Allied invasion of German-occupied France in June of 1944, famously delayed by weather, as you know. The crucial phase of that operation, the D-Day landings, was called Operation Neptune. So it went until 1989, Gulf War I. Well, not quite. First, President George H.W. Bush ordered the invasion of Panama that deposed dictator Manuel Noriega. The Pentagon had prepared contingency military plans for Panama under the code name Blue Spoon. Sure. Great. According to Lieutenant Colonel Gregory C. Szyminski's The Art of Naming Operations, published in a military journal in 1995, General James Lindsay, then head of Special Operations Command, called the Joint Chiefs to complain, asking, do you want your grandchildren to say you were in Blue Spoon? I don't know. Not really, but the name was changed to Just Cause, and a trend was born, even if some soldiers mocked that war as just because. Ever since, high-profile U.S. combat campaigns get rousing names that not only are used for funding requests to Congress and bestowing medals and ribbons, they also attempt to shape public perceptions. That's a polite way of calling them a form of propaganda. The 1991 war in the Persian Gulf, Desert Storm. 93 in Somalia, Restore Hope. 2003 invasion of Iraq, Iraqi Freedom. That one a lot less clever than most of the other ones. The 2001 invasion of Afghanistan, Infinite Justice. Until Muslim clerics called it offensive, saying that only God could deliver infinite justice. Officials swore they used computers and algorithms and such stuff. Tori Clark, an Assistant Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs in the George W. Bush administration, wrote in her recent book, A Survivor's Guide to Washington. Now, of course, not so recent. I'm pretty sure they scrawled words on a whiteboard and threw darts until they came up with Operation Enduring Freedom, as the Afghanistan war has been known since. The Pentagon spent more than 2 months before it branded the war against the Islamic State as Inherent Resolve. Administration officials repeatedly were prodded about the lack of a name, especially after the U.S. effort to fight the Ebola epidemic in West Africa was dubbed United Assistance days after it began. The selection process fell to General Lloyd J. Austin III, commander of U.S. Central Command, and his staff at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida. They didn't have free rein. They couldn't use words that convey anything offensive to good taste or derogatory to a particular group, sect, or creed, according to military rules. Suggestions were entered into Nikkki, the classified computer system. It tracks military nicknames. There's the answer for where that comes. Nikkki. Nicknames, code words, and exercise terms to ensure they're not duplicated. Officials say it doesn't actually generate names. So it's a list, not a computer? I don't know. Precisely who came up with Inherent Resolve is a secret. General Martin Dempsey, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, had to give his okay. So did the Defense Secretary, Chuck Hagel. Linguists did not. The words in and of themselves sound great, but ultimately are empty suits. They have no meaning, said Robin T. Lakoff, linguistics professor at the University of California at Berkeley. Once you hear about inherent resolve, well, you just know it's something great, something Americans must support wholeheartedly, whatever it actually is. This has always been one of the most successful games of propagandists, past and present. In a statement, Central Command said the name was, quote, intended to reflect the unwavering resolve and deep commitment to degrade or destroy the Islamic State militants and the threat that they pose. Okay. Rear Admiral John Kirby, a Pentagon spokesman, denied reports that inherent resolve was initially rejected as uninspiring. I understand that some anonymous sources said that this name was rejected, Kirby said, on October 15th when the name was announced. I'm not aware of any overt decision made by leadership here in the Pentagon to reject the name, but that's the name. It's out there, and that's what we're calling it, and now we're moving forward. Well, that's pretty military for you. Okay, I just wanted to sort of circle back to that because I had said, yeah, I felt like there was some sort of shift in the way they were assigning the names around the time of the first Gulf War, and I guess that was actually accurate. All right, let's see. Other things to share with you in the last couple minutes of today's show. Well, see, we'll never get all the way through this thing, but it's good recommended reading, and maybe I should do this now, even though we won't make it all the way through. I was going to follow up the Charlie Kirk story and their discussion of history and the way it's taught and the way it's changed and the way they changed in their regard for it. Well, actually, there's two stories, only one of which I guess actually made it to Pocket, but one of which is shorter and easier to grasp, which was an opinion piece over the weekend about Nikkki Haley and her misstatements, let's say, about the cause of the Civil War. And that led to a larger discussion of things. But what this opinion piece over the weekend was, well, I'll dig it up for you and I'll share it with you that way in the list. And it was a good piece and well put and just sort of sharing. Here it is. The miseducation of Nikkki Haley. What Nikkki Haley and I learned at a segregation academy, a piece by Elizabeth Spears, which was clarifying and helpful from over the weekend, just basically reminding people that, yeah, most people educated, white people anyway, or I should say, I guess basically non-black people, educated in South Carolina, educated in private schools established specifically for the purpose of avoiding desegregation orders, I guess I should say. And lo and behold, they tended to teach a different interpretation of the Civil War than most did. And maybe that's where it came from. And that certainly untangles things. But even more interesting and more in depth, I thought, and I don't want to sell the Elizabeth Spears piece short. It's very helpful. And in particular, makes some great points that I recognize as essentially restatements of my own thesis of how every Republican accusation is a confession. She basically says, look, this is projection. This idea, every time they complain, Republicans, about public education or education in general being indoctrination, it's because, yeah, it was in these segregation academies in South Carolina. You bet they were teaching them a very different view of the Civil War for very clear reasons, and usually reasons that were intended to get people quietly to come to Charlie Kirk's conclusions about Martin Luther King and not speak aloud the same conclusions. But it led to some very interesting digging over the weekend into just, well, we understand perhaps where it came from in South Carolina. Why did the rest of the country for many years teach this weird version of the Civil War where, you know, if not actually teaching them that it was actually about states' rights and not about slavery, certainly put the two things in parallel. Sure, it was about slavery, but also the South was claiming that it was about states' rights, et cetera, et cetera. How does that come to pass, given that there is historical record about this? And the historical record is pretty clear. The seceding states made, in many cases, explicit written claims for the record. This is about slavery. To the extent that it's about states' rights, it's about the rights of states to maintain the institution of slavery. And it is not until later, many years after the war, that there's any effort to redefine things and to say that it really was chiefly about states' rights and that slavery, yeah, sure, it was one among many. What were the other ones? Well, I don't know. How can you get to that school of understanding, if that's what it is, of the Civil War? And in revealing a very interesting and little-known story, someone recirculated this piece by Howell Raines, written December 20th of last year, an opinion piece in the Washington Post, which you might find interesting enough to read on your own, or which we may share with you on the air at some point during this week. Here's the Civil War history they didn't want you to know. That's always an intriguing framing of this, but telling the story of the 16th Army Corps during the Civil War, apparently made up in large part by volunteers from Alabama. So if you remember hearing if you were taught in the North about the Civil War and its causes, or whether it was states' rights at all were mentioned, or slavery at all mentioned, but you learned about secession, you learned about brother fighting brother, etc., etc. But you must also have heard something about the majority of Southerners not being slaveholders and not actually having a direct interest in the institution of slavery. But what convinced them then to fight for the war if they weren't slaveholders and the war was about slavery? And maybe that's what gave rise to this idea. Well, they must have thought that they were defending their homeland, defending their states and their states' rights. And that helps make a clean-cut picture. All of the South was against this. All of the North was for that. And they all fought each other en masse. And as it turns out, it was much more complicated than that, including this story of Alabama volunteers fighting for the Union.
Radio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, that makes things a lot more messy, but a lot more interesting and a lot more nuanced, and the kind of thing that we might want to read about. So I recommend this piece to you. Perhaps we'll get to it. And in the meantime, more nuance, more complicated stories? Well, you came to the right place right here on Netroots Radio. Next up, Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Stay tuned. We'll see you tomorrow.